In the fast-paced world of technology, the role of business analysts in analyzing IT requirements has never been more critical. And as demands grow, so does the need for efficient and effective analysis methods that can reveal uncertainties and optimize decision making. And that's where AI writing assistants spearheaded by ChatGPT come in. With proper preparation and prompting, they're going to guide you to harness the power of Cynefin and unravel the complexities that are hidden in your requirements, especially early in the project. In this demonstration, I'm going to guide you through the remarkable features of ChatGPT4. They're going to show how it seamlessly integrates with Cynefin to recognize complexities in your requirements. For starters, I have to set the stage by defining the role that I want the AI writer to play. Now, that's necessary to ensure that ChatGPT uses the correct general knowledge base. I've also found it particularly important to specify its experience base to get better responses. So it now knows that I'm experienced in app development for health, nutrition, and weight loss. I'm going to ask ChatGPT to apply a framework known as Cynefin. The rules regarding Cynefin are generally known on the web, but I want to limit ChatGPT's responses specifically to how I interpret the framework as a business analyst. So I'm giving it the short form of what I just introduced you to in the previous lecture. Cynefin, the domain obvious, you or someone on your team has the experience implementing this type of a requirement and knows exactly what to do. It's just a matter of getting the job done. The complicated domain. You know what questions need asking, but you're lacking the answers. You do know how to get the answers to implement the requirement. When you're dealing with complicated requirements, analytic methods like business analysis and requirements assessment prove to be very effective. The complex domain. You don't know what questions to ask. You don't know which answers to trust or whom to consult. You're overwhelmed with uncertainty. You have to find a way to move this requirement from the complex domain into the complicated or obvious domains. Next, I'm going to tell ChatGPT exactly what I want it to do and the specific input that I want it to analyze. Obviously, I'm asking it to analyze requirements and allocate them to the appropriate Cynefin domain. But I'd also like to ask it to explain its logic. These are the requirements. Let's see what it has to say for itself. Its response is nice, certainly very agreeable, at least in words. Requirement number 1. Users can create a profile with their dietary restrictions and budgetary constraints, providing personalized recommendations and options for the user. Well, ChatGPT thinks this requirement falls into the obvious domain because the concepts are well established in the field of health and nutritional apps. Since that's my area of expertise, I happen to agree. Moving on to requirement 2. Cloud-based data for vendors allows them to link nutritional and price information and make updates easy, providing accurate and up-to-date information to users. Now, ChatGPT puts this requirement into the complicated domain. It notes that while we presumably have experience with cloud-based data storage, that's an assumption, and integrating vendor-specific updates requires a deep understanding of the vendor systems and their data structures. I can see that we're going to be interacting with a variety of different vendors here and vendor applications, so I can live with that. Requirement number 3. Machine-readable menu upload and manual entry options for vendors to provide additional information, such as dietary, nutrition, and price information, more detailed and accurate information to users, okay? ChatGPT puts this requirement into the complex domain. Its logic is that implementing machine-readable menu uploads, and that involves dealing with diverse data structures, a lot of different formats, and potential data inconsistencies. That gives rise to complex data parsing mechanisms. Manual entry options need to be developed that are simple for vendors to use, but sophisticated enough to capture a variety of dietary notices and price details. This involves uncertainties and unknowns that require iterative experimentation and learning to move it from the complex domain into complicated or obvious domains is going to be difficult. Now, interestingly, I don't quite agree with it here. I would have put this one into the complicated domain. But in retrospect, I think the difference lies much more in the phrasing of the requirement than in ChatGPT's logic. I think I will have to go back to the author of the requirement for a clarification. Overall, I can see here what's going on. And the key to using Cynefin is how much my personal knowledge and experience influence which domain a specific requirement falls into for me and my team. That, to me, is the ultimate value of the Cynefin framework, because it allows me to make the right decision based on our personal knowledge base and what we need to know to do right. The final test that I'm going to ask GPT to do is assume none of my members have ever implemented a GPS location service app. How would you then rate the requirement? Use of GPS allows the app to show nearby restaurants that meet the user's specific needs, providing convenience and ease of use for finding appropriate options. Personally, I had never dealt with GPS apps at the time. I would have put that one into the complex domain. Interestingly, ChatGPT says, given the fact that none of your team members have experience implementing GPS location services, the requirement to use GPS to show nearby restaurants that fit the user-specific needs, providing convenience and ease of finding appropriate options, would fall into the complicated domain. It reasons that we know the questions to ask to implement the requirement. We need to understand how GPS location services work in an app and how to pull data from nearby restaurants and how to filter them based on the user-specific needs. That means we know what we don't know. And that means we have to find the answers, to get the answers in order to implement this solution correctly. So we don't have the answers at hand due to a lack of experience in GPS-based services. That is something that we need to figure out using analytic methods and possibly consulting an expert in GPS location services for apps. Obviously, we could also just carry out extensive research and training on our own to understand how to integrate and use GPS services effectively in our apps. I particularly love the paragraph reading. It's worth mentioning that moving from the complicated to obvious domains for this requirement will come with experience and successful implementation, which will lead to a solid understanding of best practices in GPS integration for apps. And now that's an interesting add-on and a perfect confirmation of what I said earlier. ChatGPT says that as my team learns, my understanding of using GPT on these requirements is going to morph, which it really should, because the more we know, the less uncertainty we have. So I'm about to implement these requirements, and all in all, I think this was a great demo on how to use ChatGPT to apply the Cynefin framework. It's really interesting to note that I didn't always agree with the answers, but when it explained its logic, I could have a quasi-intelligent discussion with it, just like I could with pretty much a lot of my fellow human beings. That would make me aware of the uncertainty in my requirements, which is the real power behind Cynefin.